A huge part of being successful at hunting and finding elk is being able to read their sign, knowing what to look for, what it means if you're seeing sign but not seeing elk. For a first-time elk hunter, it could take years to learn to decipher everything involved when reading elk sign. But guys and gals, it's nothing that a few visits to old Elk Camp won't be able to help you out with. In this episode, your elk hunting coaches are going to help you with understanding elk sign as well as closing the gap on elk and one of my favorite subjects, counting coup. So, my friends, pull up a chair, adjust your volumes just right, and welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host Gilbert Ornelas and elk hunting coach Joe Gillian. You want to hunt elk, and they live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Hello again, everyone. If it's your first time with us, glad to have you. Hope you enjoy the show. And for those blue collar hunters following us out there, welcome back to Elk Camp. I'm Gilbert Ornelas, coming to you from Spring, Texas, and joining me from New Mexico, your elk hunting coaches, Joe Gillia and Leroy Chav Chavez.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be back.
How you doing?
Good morning. All right, fellas, first things first. Right now, it's time for our ElkBros shout-outs. If you're new to the show, these are our shout-outs to just a few cities with the most listeners topping our charts this week.
Yep, topping our charts, and we really want to thank all of these listeners, Gilbert. Man, we're even going to give a little shout-out at the end here to a little special thing, but like I was telling you guys earlier, the ball's been rolling. This has just been awesome, and thank you so much to our listeners out there because we are on the verge. We are less than 300 downloads away from our 10,000th download, man. So
what a milestone, Joe.
Oh, it is, man. It's so cool. But like I said, remember we were talking, we were like, man, Gilbert, we had 30 listens this week.
yeah, we keep breaking our record every week too, Joe.
Oh,
so
man,
fantastic. Want to thank all our
cool
viewers.
To watch that. So let's give them some kudos out there. Topping the chart this week, this town, born from the creation of an 1870 trading post that was built on the side of a river, became Oklahoma's first oil boom town and the home of Phillips Petroleum. Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Yeah!
Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Been there many times.
Really, man?
Yeah, for you guys that don't know, I spend most of my life in the oil patch. And so, yeah, I've done a lot of work up in Bartlesville, up in Ada, up in Ponca City. I mean, all those little towns up in Oklahoma City as well. But when I worked for Smith International, Ponca City was our home. That was where our manufacturing facility was.
Well, Phillips has a huge connection over here.
Yeah, we have a big tie-in to Phillips Petroleum,
Yes,
with the
sir.
Philmont Scout Ranch.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Totally.
Yeah, it's now ConocoPhillips. So at the time, Burlington Resources sold out, and now it's ConocoPhillips.
Well, thank you guys out there for listening.
Okay, the next shout out goes to another Western town, a great place for amusement parks, pools, and playtime because more than 1/3 of the city's population is made up of people under the age of 18, making it a town full of young people. Shout out to Layton, Utah.
Layton, Utah in the house.
Layton, Utah. You almost threw them into Oklahoma. That's okay.
I tell you what, I watch a lot of pictures and look at a lot of stuff online, and there are some giant bulls in Utah.
Oh, yeah.
Huge bulls. Next up, named for King Louis XVI of France, this historic community is known for its festivals, its small town character, and its big city resources. Lewisburg, North Carolina.
So my question is, because they said it's for King Louis Louis the 16th of France. So is that Lewisburg? And you probably don't know because they don't have an oil field.
I've been to Charlotte sometimes, Joe.
A lot of coal mines over there.
Yeah. But I think it's Louisville.
It may be Louisburg. Yeah.
Yep. And if it's, hey guys, if we threw you under the bus, give us a yell, man. Educate us.
Correct us, because I'm telling you, my grammar's is pretty rough.
Up next, their favorite tunnel to go through is the 12th Street Tree Tunnel, and it's the home port to the Navy's precision flying team, the Blue Angels, Pensacola, Florida.
Blue Angels, man, that is a childhood memory for me. We never miss seeing the Blue Angels every year. Yeah.
I was just in Pensacola, Florida about 3 weeks ago playing ball. So it's a neat town and a beautiful city.
Well, one of their sayings is, we live where you vacation.
No doubt. No doubt.
Bet, man. So last but not least, the folks that live here are no strangers to buffalo. The 3 largest herds in Kansas are found here on the Maxwell Game Preserve. No, not in New Mexico, because we have a game preserve in Maxwell, New Mexico. But this is Kansas. McPherson, Kansas. I'm sorry, it's McPherson, Kansas.
McPherson, Kansas.
McPherson, Kansas.
The 3 largest herds of buffalo are in Kansas.
Well, the 3 largest herds in Kansas are found in McPherson on their reserve there. Right, yeah. So I also want to give those shout outs I talked about to our overseas listeners. I mean, how cool is this? So for you guys listening out there, Canada, thank you. Spain, hola. And I'm not going to be able to do this for everybody, but Germany, wie geht's? You know, we got a lot of people from Germany listening out here. Austria, and we have Australia. Anybody want to say hello to our Australian buddies out there? Hey, mate. Right? Mexico.
Crikeys.
Yeah, crikey. Mexico. And this one really blew me out of the water. We have listeners in Kenya, Africa, Brazil, Norway, Denmark, and Romania. So huge shout out. If you guys are listening, we so appreciate you coming all the way over and checking out elk hunting over here in the U.S., man. So that is just so cool.
Awesome. Well, all right, guys, it's time to talk about Elk Sign.
There we go.
Chav, I'm going to lead it off with you. What would you say is the one thing that really tells you that elk are in the area?
Well, you know, there's all types of sign, but I think for me, I would think that the smell and the sight of elk droppings in an area. You know, the elk droppings, you can tell if they're relatively fresh. You know, if you see steam coming out of them, you know, put your nose up in the air and smell around and look ahead, because if there's steam coming out of them, they're very close. If they're still soft and no steam, you're still in the same general area. And it would depend on if they're heading out of the area or if they're still hanging around. So I would say, you know, scent and the elk droppings. And, you know, the elk droppings, I'm sure most of you have seen them, but those of you that haven't, they're pretty big.
Yeah, right.
Pretty big.
Much bigger than a deer.
Yeah, they're like a deer, but bigger, way bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I would think that the bulls probably have a bigger dropping than the cows.
Uh-huh.
And there is a time during the early hunting season when there's a lot of moisture in the air.
Good grass.
And good grass, that sometimes the droppings aren't even pellets. They're kind of look like a cow.
More clumpy.
Yeah, clumpy.
They plop.
Right. So, you know, don't mistake that with being a cow in the area. It could be an elk dropping.
If there's a total lot of moisture, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, moisture would be the main thing. And I guess the fresh green grass, you know, the really green stuff.
Yeah.
As it gets along later in the season, the grass won't be as green and they'll start eating different things.
Drier, right.
Right. But yeah, if you come upon a fresh pile with little steam, you know, get your nose in the air and
that pile it's going to be green too.
Right.
It's going to be green. It's going to be soft, and you can you can run your foot over top of it. I mean, it just smushes down like paint cream. You know, I mean, you can really tell that is fresh just by the color, the size, and the fact that the way it smushes down,
the texture,
almost like like you're icing a cake, a kind of a disgusting cake. But but going back to what you said before, number one is smell, because I tell everybody, when you're hunting out there, we have a tendency, because of the world that we live in our everyday life, that we avoid odor. And so when we're doing things, a lot of times we're not paying attention to all of our senses. We're out there, we're either just looking, we're not looking and listening, and we're not looking, listening, and smelling. A lot of times that smell will come by, and people that have never smelled it the first time, and you point it out to them, they're like, oh, that's what that is. But they have that definite musty, pungent, and sometimes I like to say a little bit of a licorice type smell to it.
It seems like early in the year.
Yeah.
There's the licorice plants out there, or anise or anise, whichever way you want to pronounce it. They eat a lot of that. So
but
you can smell them.
Yeah, they actually. But man, you will. It's real close to a cattle smell, but to me, it's sweeter than a cattle smell. And if you catch that smell, understand you have animals very, very close. Either you have animals close, or you have urine on the ground pretty close to where you're at, one or the other, which both mean the same thing.
Right.
If you have urine on the ground and it hasn't burned off and it still has its scent, that urine has been there, since that evening, at least that night. So you do have elk in the area. And when you were talking about the bulls and the cows, some people say that a bull's dropping, when it's not doing the plop thing and it has a size to it, they say that it'll have a dimple on one side, and a point on the other, whereas a cow will have points on both sides. I've heard people that have questioned that, but like you said, definitely that it's going to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, they'll look like an acorn. That's you take off that cap,
right?
Kind of tapered at the end.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example, Chad.
Yeah.
Right, so the smell, man. Elk sign number one, and this is what we tell people that have never been out to hunt elk before, and you're so worried about finding animals. There's two huge things that those elk are going to help you with. Number one, they're vocal. That's your biggest sign out there, as these guys start talking.
Yeah.
They're herd animals. If you're, depending on what part of the rut you're hunting, or if you're hunting later in the rifle season, even all the way into December, these guys are sounding off. Okay.
Yeah.
And cows are always sounding off year round.
Very vocal. Yeah. We've been walking through the forest, and just, we move slowly and listen. And man, I can't tell you how many times they've given themselves away up ahead of us. Generally we're downwind of them if you're doing it the right way. And that sound helps carry that, or that wind helps carry that sound to you. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard a little calf, mew, or a cow whine, and you're like, uh-oh, man, we're really close. And as soon as you pop out there into a little park or whatever it may be, there they are.
And a lot of people that, again, have never experienced that, when they're walking through the woods and they hear a whole bunch of cows chirping, they mistake it for birds.
Yeah, no doubt. And there are some birds in the elk woods. Yeah. There are some birds in the elk woods that'll fool you too.
Yeah,
some grackles and stuff like that. Man, you hear that and you're like, oh man, you get all excited. You're like, you see this grackle flying by and you're like, man, that ain't fair.
Yeah, there's one bird in particular that just kind of sounds almost like him. But if you do hear a lot of cow calls and calf calls, and there doesn't seem to be any type of urgency, you're really close, then they don't know you're there. So you got to be wide awake.
Yeah. So the sound was the huge number one, and the second one is their smell. I mean, you can smell those animals from way off, and understand if you get down into an area, and a lot of people say, well, they're seeing sign, but they're not seeing animals. Well, if you're down in a park And remember, guys, when we say park, we're not talking about your neighborhood park that the city pays for.
Meadow.
Yeah, we're talking about a meadow. We're talking about a
Field.
transition into an opening. Some people call them fields. Yeah. So if you come down in there and you're finding fresh droppings, and you can see urine or smell the urine in the area, but you're not seeing any animals, that does not mean that the animals have just disappeared. They've just moved out from their feeding area and they're moving up into their bedding area. So a good thing to do is to really, you pull out your Onyx right there, take a gauge on what those thermals are doing, where the wind's coming from. If you have wind coming from a certain direction and the thermals that are heading down, there's a good opportunity to understand that they might be heading in that direction. But look at that Onyx and check out, where is that bedding area that I've marked before during my scouting, and I'm down here in the bottom because they're most likely heading that way. All right. So just because you are seeing sign but you're not seeing animals doesn't mean that all is lost, because if you're seeing fresh sign, those animals are in the area. Okay?
Amen. Yep.
Yeah, they're pretty close. They're in the vicinity. And sometimes in those meadows, there's a heavy dew in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You can see a line going right through them, or more than one, and that's elk moving through that area. Could be a bear too, I guess.
Well, yeah, it could, but
generally there'll be more than one line.
And you'll kind of get an idea what direction they're heading also.
Yeah.
If you get one line, it could be a bull or it could be a bear.
Yeah, that's huge, because now we're talking about, as sign, we're talking about elk trails.
Right.
And there's the trail that most people are used to, where you go up on the side of a hill and it kind of looks like a cattle trail moving up and down. Or we have found what we call elk highways, where they really like to move from a lower area to an upper area.
Right.
And I mean, it is just
it looks like a cow trail. Yeah.
Yes, it does. So that's something that we talk about, old trails versus fresh trails. And you can definitely tell that, because if you're seeing where those tracks are dug in, if you're seeing where the dirt, like you said, in the morning, it's kind of damp sometimes, and you can see a difference in fresh and wet when you're doing that. And it's just flat torn up. And like Chav said, a huge one that most people don't notice is the grass trails going through the parks. And
that's right.
Yeah, that's a big one, guys. If you see those grass trails and it looks like they're leading down into a park in the morning, it's not. It's coming out of the park, and they're going up on the side of the hill. So turn around, and sometimes it's easier to see those because it's where the grass gets wet, and they knock that off, and you can definitely see a change of color in that grass. And if you can see where they're headed, man, you can turn, and they're aiming right to where they're headed towards their bedding. Okay. Yep. So great thing to follow, and something that we use quite a bit on that are those trails. We talked about their urine, and early in my career, that's a huge sign for you, especially if you find that in a bedding area. And if you find it in a bedding area, because all elk, and we're going to combine the beds with this, all elk, when they get up out of their bed, they generally stand up because they've been bedded for a long time. So you guys think about yourself. What wakes you up in the middle of the night, right? Right? Yeah. Right. When you get up out of bed, man, you're heading to the bathroom, same thing. Those critters will stand up and they wet the bed, basically. So, they're, and you can pretty much tell if it's a cow or a bull by where you see that puddle of urine on that bed. If it's splattered down on the edge or outside of that bed, that's a cow. And all this comes down to is anatomy. All right. So when she stands up, she's urinating from the rear end. That bull you're going to find that puddle
midway.
Yeah, midway, right in the middle of that bed, and it's more stream oriented. There's not as much splattered. So that kind of gives you an idea. But if you're hunting in September and you're hunting after the early September pre-rut, man, most of the time, if you're finding those cows, that's all you got to worry about, because like Gilbert says, if you're going to fish, got to use the right bait.
That's it. And that is the right bait. Those bulls are not going to let those cows go unattended.
Yeah.
They're going to come find them, and they use their nose to do that.
Sure do.
Right.
Now, something that I used to do early in my career, my wife wasn't too happy with it, but I was real well known for getting down and rolling whenever I'd find an area of elk urine. I'd get down and just roll in it like a crazy little dog or something, and it really worked well for me. I kind of use it as a cover scent. The only problem is if you are using your nose to
Stays
find
with
these
you all
animals, yeah, now you've just messed with anybody else hunting with you that's downwind. They're not going to ever smell the animals, and it's going to do the same thing to you. So I kind of backed off of doing that when I started hunting with more guys, because it's so important to be able to smell those animals out there.
Well, I've been with you many times, Joe, and we both look at each other and go, we're pointing at our nose, man, we can smell them, and when you can smell them, they're close.
And most guys with me, they can tell when I'm smelling an animal, because I look just like a doggone elk, man. I start sticking my nose up there and sniffing and getting a good nostril full.
True.
But the beds where you're going to find elk beds, y'all, and you can tell them, a deer bed and an elk bed are different size. A deer bed's going to be probably about 3 foot or so, and that elk bed's going to be good 4 foot, 4.5 foot there in size. And you're going to find them up in the thick, dark timber on the sides of the hills. And generally, I mean, it's kind of what I call the gray, dark timber.
Mm-hmm.
You get in there, everything's kind of gray, dark. There's a lot of dirt. There's not a whole lot of grass. There'll be downfalls, but they'll be on the side, and they'll kind of on the edge, they'll find a little level spot, and they'll bed down up inside there. And that's where their afternoon bedding areas are. Their nighttime bedding areas are down in the bottoms where they're feeding, where they're catching water. So you'll find them in different places there.
Chav, I didn't mean to cut you off. You had something to add.
Oh, it's already
already gone.
Doggone it.
It's gone. Yeah.
I was afraid of that. Usually when Chav talks, everybody listens. He's like EF hunting,
hunting over
I need to shut up.
Tracks,
Yeah.
We've talked about smell. We've talked about the sound. Talked about droppings. We've talked about their urine. Tracks, when the biggest telltale sign of an animal moving through an area is tracks. If you're wanting to find tracks, find those areas where it's easier to see track, where there's big dirt areas and a crossing of a trail, or a muddy area around water where water's hitting around rocks in area. Those kind of places where those tracks really stick out. And can you tell the difference between a bull and a cow?
For me, most of the time, I'm looking for singular tracks, Joe. Most bulls they'll be, I guess some of them will be running together early in the season, but a lot of them will start branching off, and they'll be by themselves. If there's multiple tracks, you got to figure there's some cows in there with it, because they're just a herd animal, right?
Right.
And calves and of different sizes. But those bigger tracks that you're seeing, a lot bigger and singular, most of those are bull tracks.
Well, yeah, they're going to be bigger, wider, more rounded at the tip.
That's right.
Kind of looks more like a cattle track kind of like a young calf cow in a sense sometimes.
Yeah, for me, they're very much. I've killed both cows and bulls, and their hoofs are a lot smaller than a bull, right? A cow's hoof is. So
a cow's hoof's more pointed.
That's right. It is more pointed. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Gilbert, you kind of hit it on the head. At different times of the year, you're going to see, when you see 3 or 4 tracks together early season, that's those bulls bacheloring it up.
That's
you start seeing those singular tracks off there, that's those bulls splitting off there. And then you're going to start seeing a lot of track where the cows and the bulls are together. So there's different phases when you're going to see those. And
yeah, I can remember one morning hunting with you, and we popped out into this park, and we had a bull screaming ahead of us upwind. And it was like when he walked through that park, it was like he left a blood trail behind, right? I mean, he walked through that park and all the grass was laid down. It's just like he took a black marker and drew how he meandered up through that meadow or park. And I mean, that was him. I mean, there was no other elk in that park. He was bugling, sounding off, trying to locate, and he's just easing forward. And we eventually caught up to him up there. He beat us, but at the end of the day, we caught up to him and had a great encounter. He decided he'd run off with some other bulls instead.
You brought up a good word, though, that's good to talk about, and that's meandering.
Yeah.
Because if you are following elk track, and we've done this, man, we have just followed and tracked critters. And, again, when they're in a big group, when a bull's with a bunch of cows, they leave a lot of sign going up and down on a hill, and you can track them and follow them. And when you see those, generally when you're following them, there's a whole bunch of critters, but you'll see that, man, all of a sudden they're all kind of going single file. They're going through the same trail. There'll be a couple go off to the side, 3, 4, 5 will go off and kind of start their own trail, depending on the size of the herd. But when you see that single file line, those critters are going somewhere. They know where they're going, and they're going to get there. When you start seeing those tracks start meandering, like Gilbert taught, when they start kind of going out, coming back in, going off from the group, no longer in single file, you had better start looking around, because if that means they're feeding in the area or they're getting ready to bed in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. Carl Gamage and I and Scott Deaton one morning were easing up through one of those parks, and we'd been calling, had an unbelievable encounter with some bulls that we just couldn't get to lock down because they were with cows, and they were herding those cows up and around and up and around. And we're easing along, and we've got an elevated position to our left and a pretty good flat park here to our right. And we're easing along, just mewing and cow calling, and I hear something clink rocks right above me. And I turn and look, and it's three spikes looking down at us like, hey, man, what are y'all doing down there? Right? I'll never forget it. I look up and got 3 elk kids looking at us down there like with big spikes. And
those spikes, they go through a tough time, man, at the rut, because
they do.
Yeah. What has happened is that they're spending their life with the cows. I mean, the first 2 years of an elk's life, they're with the cows, man. And you'll see a lot of those young bulls and those spikes and stuff stay with them. So here they are, they're wanting to stay with, mama, aunt, and all of them, where they're comfortable. And you got these friggin' bulls start pushing them out of there and tell them, get the heck out of here, man, get away. So a lot of times they're a little on the lost side, and they're just trying to find anybody to group up with.
Yeah,
man.
Real vulnerable.
Real vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And good eating.
Yeah. And they're big animals.
Yeah, shame on them. I can tell you that, Joe. Shame on them.
So there's a lot of calls, man. There's a lot of things that you do are going to bring spikes into you.
That's
and,
it.
Those cow calls, spikes are going to come in, when they hear those roundup cow calls and stuff like that, buddy.
Gosh, Joe, how many of them we've had just about run over us? They're goobers, those big spikes are. So
going back to the tracks, here's another thing though. All right, we talked about single file, and then we saw the meandering. So let's say you're going in and you see some meandering tracks, and all of a sudden you see some of them that look like, man, they're deep and dirt is thrown up. And what has happened there is there was a group of elk that you were following that started to feed, started looking to bed down, and they spotted you and they blew out of there. Yeah, you start seeing that kicked up dirt, or you see that grass kicked up or that snow kicked out, man. They have spotted you. It doesn't mean all is lost. What's that, Gilbert?
More than likely, they smelled you. You got a little gust from the gods or something like that, and boom, they're gone.
If
they don't even need to see you. They can just smell you and be gone.
If they smelled you, you're better off than if they saw you and blew out.
For real, yeah.
Because if they smelled you, they're going to go certain,
Distance.
they're going to go in a direction to make sure they're not going to deal with you, and then they're going to settle back down. So if they see you, they might just go right over top of the hill there and go into a different
disappear.
drainage. Yeah.
But they leave a pretty good depression and a lot of dirt when they're doing that. So there's still a chance you can follow them, for a little ways to see if they're really spooked or not, or if they saw you or not.
Yeah.
But understand, they have one thing that they like to do. When they do that, when they go up on top of a ridge, and when they're blowing and they're getting ready to go into another drainage, they'll go on the top of that ridge, they'll start going across it, and one will turn and come back and will stand looking over that ridge on the back trail. So, yeah, they've got us figured out every now and then, man. They're
smart critters, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the smartest critter I've ever hunted.
Yeah. That's like a lot of people don't understand too. Like, if you have a bull or a cow that's coming into you and they stop, man, and they stop and they're just standing there, they're staring. Okay. And you kind of see sometimes they'll lift a back foot maybe and start to do something. If you see those critters start to take a pee, they're getting ready to bail. Yeah, because that's one of the things that they do is before they go out of an area, and the mothers are real notorious for this when they have calves, but before they blow out of the area, they're going to urinate because it confuses a predator that's chasing them. It leaves that strong scent right there in that area. So that's something also just to kind of keep in your learning here as you guys are going along.
If you see that happen, don't draw back because they're on high alert.
Yeah.
They're ready to skidoo.
And most of the time it's going to be a horrible shot anyway, because they're probably quartering at you, and they're nervous, they're locked in. So a good thing to do is just let them back out, let them go, because they're still not quite sure unless they've got a snoot of you, unless they've got a nose full of you.
Yeah.
So they might kind of go out nervous and you just leave it be and you kind of rework that again.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's always a smart old cow that'll take her time.
Man, she'll wear you out, buddy. She's got she got the patience of Job. Let me tell you, they will flat wear you down, and in a standoff. You don't want that. I can just tell you, they're gonna win.
Well, when you're working with a herd, the ones that are controlling what's going on are the cows, man. That lead cow is determining where they're going. That bull is pretty much just following, just scent checking. Now, if he's got other bulls that are starting to come in and push in on him, he'll start hooking some cows and stuff and tell them, let's get with the program, go where you want to go, but let's get moving. Yeah.
He'll start pushing them, wanting to get away from all them satellites.
Yeah. Another big thing we haven't talked about yet as far as sign goes is rubs.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a huge portion of us looking for where bulls have spent some of their time, getting their velvet off of their antlers, and I know you, buddy, want us to say antlers there, Joe.
Yeah. I got a text from Lance just yesterday saying, "Good job, man." And I told him, I said, "Daggum biologist," and he's like, "Freaking rednecks."
he ruined our horn talk, Joe.
Yeah. He says it's hard to put up with rednecks, man. We just have no good English. But as far as rubs go, there's two kinds of rubs you guys are going to come across out there. You're going to come across those where they find themselves a tree, anywhere. I mean, it could be 2 inches in diameter to 6 inches in diameter. And they're working that tree to get that velvet off of their horns. Yep. So if you think about that's when they're rubbing that velvet off. That's still early season. Mm-hmm. So where you're finding those rubs means, there's bulls that have been in that area, but that might not be where they're at right now. In some cases, there's not a lot of distance between that staging phase and where they're going to find the cows. In some places, there can be a pretty good distance from that staging phase to where they find the cows. It just kind of depends on the terrain and different things that affect that.
Yeah, and you can tell from the freshness of the rub too. If there's sap coming out, a lot of them use pines, right? That's what gives their antlers that real dark texture to them, because that sap on the pine stains the horns. But
and gets in the dirt with that sap. Yeah,
absolutely. And then one of the things, that's a bull that's doing that. So I always like to look how far up on the tree did he snap the top of it off, right? I mean, if he's way up there, that's a big bull. They don't get on their hind feet to rub their horns. At the end of the day, when they're whipping a tree that's 7 foot up and got it skinned up pretty good, that's a really good bull.
That's a good sized bull.
And if it's all dripping and you can tell it's fresh, it's not, super dry and brittle. If it's dripping and been pretty fresh within the last couple of days, he's in the area.
Well, the tree branches, the pine needles are still green. They haven't started browning yet and stuff like that. That sap is still running on it. And, again, they just depending on the date of when your hunt is, whether they're still in that staging area in the pre-rut or whether they're going to move on now to where they're getting with their cows and they're herding up. Yeah. But the other kind of rub you're going to see is where they go and blow up trees.
Oh, yeah.
And this happens a lot of times and when that rut is starting off, because that's how those bulls now are communicating dominance. And when they are displaying for cows to show, that they're big and they're bad, they hear another bull, that bull will go over and just start ripping up a tree, man, just kind of displaying that, hey, I'm the dominant bull here. I'm the big boy. I'm the one that you want to be with. So when you start finding those in those parks, especially, man, you see like those 4-foot pines that are just been destroyed.
Yeah.
Or they get in juniper trees and stuff like that, and they blow those up. Now you're looking at bulls that are with cows, that are displaying, that are rutting, and these are really, that's a great time, man, that when, raking a tree is one, I've said it before, it's the cheapest and most effective elk call you can find, raking a tree.
Yep.
So, pay attention to those rubs, to the two different kinds. The trees where they're getting off their velvet, and then when they're blowing up their bushes, because in those small saplings, because they're displaying, they're being dominant, and that's definitely an area where elk are at at that time.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times we've rolled through an area and seen just a huge line of rubs, right, where they frequent it, and that clues you into, all right, well, we're at least where they were at one time. Let's read that sign and see how fresh that was,
Yeah, when you see that line like that, either that dude has been, got a herd and he's just friggin' going off, man. He's just blowing up everything around because he got bulls that are getting him excited, getting him worked up, getting him aggressive, or it's a spot that's being visited quite a bit in the evenings by a group, a herd group with a good herd bull in it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a little bit more about the rubs, and then of course you can go there and not see anything for a week. But because of the heavy use, sometimes it's like quarter, going from one area to another, and there just happens to be a tree in the way. So, they'll tear it up.
Yeah.
And then wallers, if you find a waller, and they could be just about anywhere, sometimes you're just walking, all of a sudden there's a waller right in the middle of nowhere. They're able to locate those with their nose, of course. And, that's a good place to look too, to see how frequently they're being used.
Explain to them what a wallow is, though.
Well, a waller could be just what looks like a spring. It could be a couple of feet wide, and it could be several feet wide, and it I guess it'd be like a stock pond, except a tiny one. And in some places it's just a wet spot where they'll want to get down and dirty. And they'll use it for, for a variety of reasons, mainly to cool off from the heat. But, I guess they can drink out of it too if they need to.
Yeah, it's really, and they scent themselves up because, they jump up and down and they get that mud all over them. They urinate in it. They get themselves all scented up, all mudded up. It helps keep the bugs off of them, but it really makes them, you hear us talk about a ruddy bull, that bull's a ruddy bull, man, because he's just so mudded and stunk up, he's been hitting
I've
those
seen them
wallows.
pure black. I mean, they're black. Just black with mud.
Yeah, we saw a giant one year.
Yeah, and
I mean, totally black coming out of that stuff.
And there's ways that you can tell if a wallow is being used or, if it's been used lately or if it hasn't, because you can go up there and if there is any water inside of it and that water's clear, nothing has hit that wallow. If you go in there and it's all browned up, and I love a real good wallow where a guy's getting down in there and he's throwing mud all over everything. You can see the hair inside the mud on there, really getting worked up and covering himself up. And like Chap said, it could be just something small that you find a spring up there in the hills, or it could be they'll wallow on the side sometimes of a big marsh, or they really love a pond with marsh on it, and you'll see 4, 5, 6 different wallows in there where those animals are coming in.
Where water collects.
Yeah, and if it's up high enough, sometimes it's a midday waller. I know several guys that I've talked to, they use trail cams to put on those wallers, and they check them every couple of days, and you can almost pattern some of those bulls coming to those wallers in the midday, noon, 1 o'clock, that they're coming in there wallering because it's up high. They're not down low. It's up high in some of those springs that are up there, and they've been able to, score on hunting in the midday over those wallers.
Yeah, no, you yanked that right out of my mouth, dude, man.
Sorry, brother.
That's all right, man. Yeah, you read my mind. Great minds think alike, because that's exactly right. Those wallows up there in those hills are great midday, and that's generally when those are going to hit those. A lot of those other ones that are down lower, it's when they're doing their feeding and they're rutting at night. Man, if you have a full moon or anything like that, it just goes berserk in those places. So, a wallow can be a heartbreaker. You got to be careful about, there's some people will set up on them and have had good success. Like you said, people put trail cams on them. But, there's times you could wait there 3 days and they don't hit that one because they're in another one. But what I love to mark wallows on my Onyx. And guess what, y'all? I don't know if you've been on Onyx lately, but you can go on there now and you go look at their waypoints, their markers for marking different things. Oh my God. They have added, they went on Instagram and they asked hunters, what kind of markers do you want on there? And we'll give it to you. I mean, they've got marker for rub, ATV, wallers. They got it for a cow elk, bull elk, coyote, bear. I mean,
that's right.
They gave you the ability to mark all kinds of great things. And so what is good about marking a wallow is, let's say that you have shadowed a herd bull with some cows. You let them go up into your bedding area, into their bedding area. You lay off of those, because at about 11, 12 o'clock, that bull with those cows laid down, that's the time he's going to come off, because he knows where his girls are. He's going to come off. That's a great time to call him in. That's a great time that he goes to a midday waller. So if you have wallers marked and you see where they've bedded in an area that's right off of that waller, that's a great, great calling spot, man. You can get over in that wallow. You can do a little bit of calling over there. You can go ahead and start splashing that water with a stick.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's really awesome. So that's something to think about there.
Yeah, that would be like the ideal situation with the wallers. But do you remember that one year we're packing up, ready to go home? We're down in the flatlands.
Oh, yeah.
There's hardly any cover of any kind. And we heard a bugle. And it goes, that a bugle?
1 o'clock. 1 o'clock, man.
About 90, 95 degrees.
Yep.
Wow.
And we kept hearing that bugle getting closer and closer. And sure enough, a bull with a herd, a couple of satellite bulls in there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got some great pictures.
Yeah. We
already had everything loaded up. We didn't have a chance to go after it.
Yeah. We had already killed our bulls. We were packing up. We're getting out of there. And,
Right.
And this happens. And in fact, you can see pictures on that bull. If you look at the heading on our website and stuff like that, you'll see a bull out there. Beautiful, gorgeous.
That was him.
6'5".
Yeah, he came down middle of the day.
Middle of the day. He was like, well, forget y'all stay embedded.
Right. Exactly. We got stuff to do.
Yeah. I want to get some water, and it's the middle of the day. It's hot.
I'm gonna waller. Yeah.
Let's go do it. Yeah. So that's one great example, man.
Yeah, and he came a long way.
A long way
to get there.
Mm-hmm. Sure did.
Long way.
Yeah. So next on our list of things we wanted to talk about is that a lot of new hunters really don't understand how to close in on a bull when they do hear that bull sound off. And I know this because, I have a lot of guys with me, and the way I go after a bull, they're like, what the heck, man? And so, I mean, Gilbert, you've been with me, man. We hear one sound off. What's happening, man?
We're rolling, buddy. I'm going to tell you right now, we put it in high gear, as high as my gear will go, which is pretty slow. But at the end of the day, we're going to go, and we're going to go till we can close that gap. And, if he's just meandering with a herd and just kind of boodling along, he's not really in a big hurry, we can usually catch up to him. Now, listen, if they're on a mission and they're getting to the top up there, you better be between them somewhere, because it's really, really hard to chase them up,
Right.
So, but if it's early morning and we hear one, or in the, mid-afternoon, man, we're going. And we're going to try to get between him and those cows if he's with cows. That's one of the things that when you're talking to him, you can really determine whether he's with cows or not. You can really tell. If he keeps pushing and he keeps pushing away, 90% of the time he's got a big group of cows with him.
And he's following them, man. Those cows are going where they want to go, and he's just following right behind them. And
if you hear him sounding off several times in the same place, he's hanging out, and he may have some cows with him, but he's hanging, and that's the time to really work in there hard on him, get in there. I think a lot of people try to go in too soft, and they run the risk of the bull leaving the area if they're going in there too soft.
So I'm out there, I scream a bugle, location bugle, and I get a response. Well, what I want to do now is I kind of want to test the waters on that animal to find out if that critter's coming to me, if he wants to play, if he just wants to locate, if he's looking for cows. So I kind of test that animal's temperament. So the next time that I give one, I'll kind of give a little cow call, and then I'll give a bugle that is just a little bit. Now I don't turn it up hard and aggressive.
Challenging,
but I might just do it just a little bit more there to actually sound like more of a roundup type bugle for the animals that I have, like telling him I have cows and I'm not worried about you. I'm just tending my cows. So I'm not calling at that bull. I'm more talking to my herd. And then I'm going to find out, okay, now that animal's going to sound off again. If he still just does that location bugle and he's off a little bit, man, then I want right away. We are
close the gap.
Guys, I wear tennis shoes. and we're going to get after it.
He ain't lying.
And we're going to get after it. We're going to close the gap. And what you want to do is and understand this. I have blown up situations because I've gone in so hard. And I thought the animal, because he bugled in a different direction, was further than what he was. And you come up and you come around the corner and we're face to face. Yeah, I've had that happen. I've blown up situations. But I can tell you this, because of my aggressive style, I've created a lot more situations than I've blown up. Yep. So we're going to close the gap. Hunt chaff.
Right.
Yeah. And we're going to get in, and we want to get in at least 200 yards off that animal, 150 yards before we start to change our pace.
Okay.
Because once I figure I'm within 200 yards of that animal, now I'm getting ready to be what I call in his bubble, you know, in a zone. And I might just make a little cow call at that point, just to throw that out there and to find out if he's going to answer that call. And then I can tell from his temperament and how he responds back, whether he's like, oh boy, yeah, we got us one here.
Yeah, bring some more of them girls up here.
Yeah. Or whether he's, you know, he's going to start being aggressive, or, you know, and find out now, is he still coming, or am I going to have to go in? Is he making sounds like he has cows with him?
Yeah.
If so, you know, now it's time for me to start again doing some of those things like raking, doing those low noises, doing the cow calls. So I start figuring it out from them. But let me tell you what, guys, do not come from deer hunting land, hear an animal, and start stalking in on it, because by the time you get anywhere, all you're going to have is dust and dirt, and ain't going to be no critters. Okay?
Gandhi, yeah. You know, also, one of the things when you're diving in there on him, if you can tell, be listening. If he's got cows with him, they'll start sounding off too, because those are his centuries. I mean, they're going to be on the lookout for him, and they're just so sharp with their eyes. So you got to really be careful. Make sure you're checking your wind as you're closing the gap, and also be looking for those cows too, because if they're on the flanks or with him at all, they're going to be looking, and they don't miss much at all. So be kind of cautious about, I think your ears can help you out there more than anything. If you can hear that herd mewing and soft mewing, and, calves give themselves away. They're so vocal and noisy. And what I don't want you to do is just turn a deaf ear or a blind eye to him having some company and then rolling up in there and blowing the whole thing up,
What were you going to say?
I was going to add that, if you come in stalking silently and very, very careful, you take one step and that's probably about a foot or two. Well, every step you take, they're taking 10 steps. So they're getting further and further away. That's why you want to close that gap.
Right. And, people are like, well, what about the noise? Aren't you worried about your noise? No, I'm not. In fact, I have already told him that there's another elk in the area. Elk are noisy critters. And when we start running in on that, we're making noise moving through that they're going to hear. It's just going to sound just like other animals there. Again, once I get in tight. So you just got to think about it like this, man. You're kind of guesstimating where those animals are. And man, I always haul and try to cut off as much as that. I try to get as if I can, 2/3 of that distance cut off. Now I'm slowing down the pace. And the main reason I'm slowing down the pace is not because I'm worried about him hearing me or anything like that. It's because I want to hear them, like Gilbert was saying. I want to hear if there's any cow sounds, if he's doing any kind of raking, if he's doing any kind of chuckling, or I can hear that bull walking in as well, doing stuff. So
yeah, perfect scenario. Long story short, my first bull I ever killed, we had him talking to us the whole time, and he just would not he just wouldn't bow the knee and come the distance we needed him to come. And for us, going to him was not an option because of where we were strategically. Finally, Joe got him fired up and he started rolling. But he started rolling in a different direction. And Joe knew the terrain, and he said, I know exactly where he's going. And I want to tell you something, people. I don't run very well in all that brush and everything. You've got a razor strapped to the end of an arrow, and we actually ran. I'm talking full out sprint. We're going here, slid up into an area where we'd already had set up. But when we slid into that area, into that deadfall, we knew he was coming. We looked up, and sure enough, he pops right out of where Joe thought he was. I mean, this was like, if you could have scripted it, it didn't go any better.
Right.
And but we had to cut the distance, make the call, get him aggravated and interested, and then it was almost like he really didn't care too much that we were there, but he was on a mission, and Joe knew where he was going.
Well, and our noise of us running like that sounds like another bull heading to the same area he's going, and that actually brings them up a little bit.
I think so, because when he came out, man, he had his head up, and he was looking for whatever it was, talking back to him. And we were pretty smart in having one of your Montana decoys up there on the
I had
side.
set it up right.
And he saw that decoy. And when he saw that decoy, man, he didn't even think. I mean, he came straight to us. And Joe said, well, are you ready? I said, well, heck yeah, I'm ready. And I said, well, I'm going to stop him with a cow call and cover your draw. And when I do that, you go ahead and draw. And it was priceless, one of the best moments of my hunting career. But it was because we were aggressive and we stuck with it, you know, and we did all of this on reading him and getting to where we needed to be. Right. But closing that distance at a and look, I don't go fast, but I'm telling you, that day I was going fast.
Yeah.
I had no dadgum choice. Joe was pulling me like a freight train down through there. So
when it's time to move, you get moving, because there's only so many opportunities, and the more you keep creating that.
And the rest is history. He's right there.
Yeah, he's right there behind you, huh? In fact, I was on a podcast the other day, the Where to Hunt podcast, and Eric Clark had asked me about my most memorable hunts, the hunts that really stick in my mind. And what I had told him was, really, I think two of my most memorable hunts were one time when I brought a bull in for Chav to kill, and bringing that bull in that you're talking about right there. And they were, to me, seeing the success of you guys was probably one of the most memorable, most enjoyable, fulfilling moments that I had. So now, we've talked about closing in on that bull, and there's something else that I want to talk here as we're coming down to the end. And
one of my favorite subjects.
Yes, sir. Counting Coup. And if you guys have never heard about counting Coup, the Native Americans believe that the bravest act that a brave could do in battle was to touch his enemy without killing him. And that just showed how brave they were to go up and be able to touch that enemy and get away with it. And I've always thought about that. And, throughout my hunting career, our hunting career, it's been a big part of what I do, because I have taken a lot of animals, but I have counted Coup on hundreds and hundreds of animals. In other words, I had that animal in shooting, killing, distance, shot, and I've even pulled back without an arrow. I've pulled back without a bow in my hands, and I've counted Coup. I knew that animal would be an animal that I could have taken. And I've done this in a lot of off-season situations, and I've actually done it in season. I've said I don't pass on a lot of animals, but there's certain times because it's first day of a 11-day hunt, and I really want to just keep working the hunt, and I'm willing to work for a more mature bull until about day 5, and then
and everything's on the table.
Yeah, but I'll tell you this, before I only had 5 days to hunt before I had to be out and guide. Right. So I didn't pass anything at that time, man. I mean, if it came in, it was going down. But
Brown is down.
But there's so many opportunities that you're going to be close to cows, or you're going to be close to spikes, or you're going to be close to raghorns, and there's so many people that feel like when an animal comes into 50 yards, man, I better shoot it or I'm going to lose that opportunity. And what I love about counting Coup on animals is you find out really quick that that's not always the case, man. That, if you just are a little patient, you're going to end up with a 20 yard, with a 15 yard, with a 10-yard shot on that animal. And you learn how to read their body language so that when you get in that situation where they're 50 yards out and all of a sudden you see that nervousness or they've stopped and they're starting to urinate. Yeah. Well, now you know that the situation's different, just by learning the animal. And we've played with them so many times in the off season, calling cows and different things like that, playing with bulls. It's
and you also develop the habit of placing yourself in a position where you could make the shot. I think there's a tendency for a lot of hunters to hide behind something.
Right.
And when you do that, you limit your shooting lanes. That's the first thing that I found strange when I first started was I'm supposed to stand in front of the tree instead of behind the tree.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to close the deal, you got to have your shooting lanes. You got to be in front. I think last year, one of the guys had an opportunity for a really close shot.
Oh my God.
But he was standing and he had a branch right in front of him.
Well, look, I mean, Chad, if we don't sit in front of those junipers, we don't ever get a shot at the bull I killed, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we put ourselves in front of it, and the bulls are, at one time they were 12 feet from us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, we put ourselves in the right position, but most guys would sit behind those junipers and try to hide, and then you're not going to ever get a shot.
Right. We could have counted Coup last year just by reaching out with a stick and tapping him on the
Yeah, basically you guys did count Coup on it because and that happens a lot. A lot of you guys out there, what's going to happen is you're going to end up in a situation where you're basically in a herd. You've got cows around you, you've got small bulls, maybe you're focused on this big bull that you're working, and really you get an opportunity to count Coup on multiple animals and learn about those animals just in that time. And I think what it does is it really helps you have more of an inner calmness. And I don't mean, I don't mean you're not going to get excited,
right?
But it just helps you being in proximity of these animals without, like Gilbert says, everything going out your butt crack, right?
Oh man, I'm telling you. I think the more encounters you have, you've said this 1,000 times, Joe, when you get one under your belt, it gets easier. But I think the more encounters you have, the better you can control your heart rate, the better you can control your focus, everything. For me, it's about zeroing in on that animal. Once I make a decision and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to harvest that animal, then it's never about looking at anything other than where I need to be with my shot placement, right?
And I in all of these years of mine, I get to a certain point, a zone of focus when I have an animal in front of me, and I get in a mode, an instinctive mode. And it's funny, I'm so focused at that point, but man, once that shot's made, that's when you kind of fall apart.
Oh man,
like, oh my God!
The Venezuelan mafia call it vidalakis, and man, I shot a deer last year with my son. We were setting up in a tree stand on the river down at the Nueces River. Chav sat up in it a couple of times, and I shot a deer there. And I'm telling you, it was so intense because he was so on edge when he came in, and we just never thought we were going to get a shot opportunity. When I finally got drawn on him, which was a feat in itself because he was so nervous, and I finally got drawn on him, and I had to hold for about 2.5 minutes till he finally stood right, and then I cut it loose. As soon as I cut it loose and we knew that he was hit good and he almost went over and fell over immediately, I'm telling you, that endorphin released in me. I almost passed out, Joe. I'm serious. The little pins you see and everything. I'm telling you that it's a real thing, and you need to be prepared for that. And if you're standing on the side of the mountain, you better sit down because it's a long way to the bottom.
I did tell that story of that first big bull that I shot. That one that's hanging back there, and at the time, when I released that arrow, I never hardly remember releasing my arrows. It becomes so instinctive and everything with what I do that I usually don't even remember the thought of releasing. But I can remember after I hit that animal and I could see in slow-mo him digging in, him turning out, seeing that fletch buried all the way and running out. And after that playthrough, I literally fell backwards on my back, just kind of like hyperventilating, trying to pull it all together, man. You know, it's an incredible experience, and that's what we live for. That's why we do this, and you know, that's way cool. It's, if I ever quit getting excited like that, I don't think I need to be doing this anymore. So
you were talking about having experiences with others. My first experience, that no doubt killing this bull up here was an amazing experience, but the first bull I ever called in, Joe, was for chav.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I'll never forget that as long as I live. Not only was it an epic journey to get there and back, but at the end of the day, we didn't call just one bull in, we called a whole herd in. And it was crazy how it all unfolded. But that was one of my most memorable times. And then, you know, last year and the year before, creating a party for chav, and you know, having that bull come in and silhouetting us on the decoy and all of that. Those are the things that I live for, man.
Yeah.
And I get more excited doing it for other guys than I do just for myself.
And I was going to talk about that too when Jeff brought up about the decoys. You know, you know, we use decoys, and we're going to actually do a podcast on decoys, talking about some different methods. But that's the one time that you can be behind something, because you're going to use other stuff behind you, breaking you up. But it is amazing how you can get away with so much behind a decoy when you have an animal coming in.
Just don't have the sun behind you.
Just make sure you don't have the sun behind you, so it's silhouetting you, right through that decoy.
I wondered why that bull stopped and looked.
Oh, he looked.
What in the world?
So Gilbert's talking about, me and Gilbert, we had chav in an area, and we found some bulls. We had spotted them, and so we set chav up in front of us, and I went up on the hill, and Gilbert went off to the side into the trees, and basically we're painting a picture. We're telling a story about some bulls that are up there with some cows, and these bulls start coming in, and I'm up on top of the hill, and it's first thing in the morning. The sun's coming over the rise, and it's just this beautiful, beautiful morning. And get these bulls to come all the way in, and they're coming into chav, man. All of a sudden, this one bull stops, and he just kind of looks at me, and his head starts going back aside, and and he kind of gets this whole different walk to him, and starts circling and going over into the trees. I'm like, what the heck boogered that animal, And the sun, a big, beautiful sunrise, was coming up directly behind me. So when I held up that Montana, all you could see was my silhouette coming through that decoy. So guys, we tell you, man, we try to tell you guys these things because we've made just about every mistake there is. And, it's not that we're so smart. It's not that we're pros at this. We've just had a lot of experiences and made a whole bunch of mistakes, and we're sharing them with you. So
and keep learning every time.
Keep learning every time we're
right.
Yeah, put that in that memory bank, man, and draw from it when you get in those situations.
Yeah.
That was a fun, epic time. That's the things you live for. You see the bulls, you get them to do everything you wanted them to do, and they are closing the distance. We probably needed him to go another 15 yards, maybe 20 yards for chav, and he was coming. But as soon as he caught that silhouette, I mean, it was like, oh, I don't look like any cow I've ever seen before, right? So,
all right, guys.
Unbelievable show this week, fellas. Can't wait for next week's show. Want to thank all of our listeners. Be sure to send us all of your questions at info@elkbros.com. Please rate and review. Those 5-star reviews are huge for us. We're just a few away from our 10,000th download. So you guys,
that's right, man.
You guys keep rocking on. Let's get to that 10,000 download this week. From Joe and Chav in New Mexico, I'm Gilbert Ornelas here in Spring, Texas. God bless all of our grinders out there. Kiss your wives. Wives, kiss your husband. Hug your babies. Keep your broad head sharp and your powder dry. And we'll see you next week right here on Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
See you guys next time.
Next time.